In a quiet Igbo village cradled by the banks of the sacred Njoku River, life pulsed in harmony with the rhythm of the waters. The river was no ordinary one. Its shimmering surface reflected not only the sunlight, but the deep reverence of the villagers who depended on its bounty. Legends whispered through generations spoke of a spirit who dwelled in its depths, a goddess whose blessings sustained their lives, but whose wrath could destroy them all. This year, the YamFestival, a time of joyous celebration and thanksgiving, was just days away. Drummers rehearsed their beats, children crafted colorful masks for the masquerade dances, and the scent of roasted yams mingled with the cool breeze from the river. Yet amidst this lively preparation, an air of unease hung over the village. One misty morning, as the first rays of the sun kissed the water, a stranger arrived. She emerged from the forest path leading to the river, her bare feet brushing the dewy grass. Her name, she said, was Amara, a widow in search of a fresh start. Dressed in a simple wrapper and carrying a clay pot balanced on her head, she seemed unremarkable at first glance, until you met her eyes. Her gaze held the color of the river after a storm, green, deep, and mysterious, as if they carried secrets older than the village itself. Though her voice was soft, it commanded attention. The villagers, always wary of newcomers, offered her a modest hut near the riverbank, unaware of how profoundly her arrival would alter their lives. Even the elders, who prided themselves on reading omens and signs, couldn't discern the true nature of this stranger. And so, Amara began her life among them, weaving herself into the fabric of their community, even as her presence rippled through the village like the first stirrings of a storm. Amara settled into her new life quietly, taking up the trade of a potter. Her skill was unparalleled. Every clay pot she shaped seemed to carry the essence of the river, smooth, durable, and adorned with intricate patterns of waves, fish, and ancient symbols. It wasn't long before her creations became the most sought-after items in the village market. At first, the villagers marveled at her talent. "A widow with hands as gifted as the river's flow," they murmured. Okeke, the village elder whose wisdom guided the people, was one of the few who welcomed her openly. "You carry a strength in you, Amara," he told her one evening as they watched the sun set over the river. "May it be a blessing to our village." But not everyone was as kind. Neka, a trader known for her sharp tongue and sharper greed, began to eye Amara with suspicion. "How can someone new to our village craft pots so fine? Who taught her? What is she hiding?" she whispered to her friends at the market. Chidi, a young man whose temper often outweighed his sense, was another detractor. He mocked her strange green eyes and her quiet demeanor, calling her a witch when she didn't rise to his taunts. Yet Amara bore these slights with patience, her expression calm as still water. The village, with its thatched roofs and bustling market square, became her home. She joined in the daily routines, fetching water from the river, tending to her small garden, and preparing meals in her modest hut. Yet, even as she seemed to blend into the community, a sense of mystery clung to her. Late at night, when the village fell silent, some swore they heard her singing by the riverbank, a haunting melody that made the hairs on their necks stand on end. Others claimed to see her standing ankle-deep in the water, her eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. The villagers dismissed these tales as figments of overactive imaginations, but the stories spread nonetheless. And so, the seeds of both admiration and suspicion were sown, setting the stage for events that would soon unravel their peaceful lives. The day of the YamFestival dawned bright and clear, the sky painted in hues of gold and azure. It was a sacred day, a celebration of the land's abundance and the blessings of the gods. The villagers woke at the first light, their huts alive with the sounds of bustling preparations. Children darted through the village paths, carrying messages and errands, while women sang traditional songs as they pounded yam in wooden mortars. The rhythmic thud of pestles echoed through the air, blending with the distant roll of drums as the men prepared the square for the festivities. Amara's modest hut was no different. She had risen early, as she always did, and stood at the riverbank fetching water in her clay pot. The river's surface shimmered, reflecting her calm demeanor. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, a storm of emotions brewed. This was her first YamFestival among mortals, and she knew it would test her patience and resolve. Returning to the village, Amara joined the women in arranging the feast. They wove palm fronds into decorations, hung colorful cloth banners, and laid out roasted yams, spicy soups, and fresh palm wine. Her hands moved with a quiet efficiency, and the other women couldn't help but admire her craftsmanship, even as they whispered behind her back. "She works hard, but there's something unusual about her," one woman muttered to another. "Her eyes, you mean? They're not normal," the other replied, casting a furtive glance at Amara. Amara ignored the whispers, focusing on her tasks. She had heard such comments before and knew they stemmed from fear of the unknown. It was not their fault. Humans often feared what they did not understand. By mid-morning, the village square buzzed with life. Drummers pounded on their instruments, their hands moving in a blur, creating beats that resonated deep in the chest. Dancers adorned in traditional attire spun and leaped, their movements fluid and powerful. The aroma of roasted yams and spiced soups filled the air, mingling with the earthy scent of the river. The elders, dressed in their finest wrappers and coral beads, took their places of honor under a large thatched canopy. Okeke, the wisest among them, held a carved staff in one hand and a calabash of palm wine in the other. His eyes, sharp despite his years, scanned the crowd, taking note of the vibrant energy and the subtle tensions that simmered beneath it. Amara stood at the edge of the festivities, observing the scene. She marveled at the vibrancy of human life, the laughter, the music, the camaraderie. Yet she also saw the shadows, the envy, the pride, the unspoken resentments that lingered in the corners of their hearts. It was during the masquerade dance that trouble began to brew. The masquerade dancers entered the square to a crescendo of drums and flutes. Their costumes were elaborate, with masks that depicted spirits, ancestors, and animals. The crowd erupted in cheers as the dancers performed feats of agility and grace, their movements telling stories of valor, wisdom, and divine intervention. Amara watched from a distance, her lips curving into a faint smile. These dances, though human interpretations, held echoes of the spiritual world she belonged to. But amidst the joy, Chidi's voice cut through like a jagged blade. "Why don't you join the dance, mysterious widow?" he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. His tone was mocking, his words laced with the intoxication of palm wine. The drumming faltered slightly as heads turned toward Amara. She stood still, her calm gaze meeting Chidi's fiery one. The crowd hushed, tension crackling in the air like a storm about to break. "Or are you afraid your strange eyes will frighten the spirits?" Chidi continued, emboldened by the silence. His friends laughed nervously, unsure whether to support him or retreat. Amara stepped forward, her movements deliberate and graceful. The crowd parted as she walked, their eyes fixed on her. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but carried a weight that silenced even the most restless. "The spirits need no masks to recognize who honors them and who mocks them," she said. Her words hung in the air, sharp as a blade and steady as the river's flow. Chidi's smirk faltered, but his pride refused to back down. Fueled by humiliation and anger, he grabbed one of Amara's clay pots from a nearby table and held it high for all to see. "This is your so-called magic?" he sneered, smashing the pot to the ground. The shards scattered, their intricate patterns glinting in the sunlight. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The drummers stopped playing, and an uneasy silence fell over the square. Amara knelt slowly, gathering the fragments of the pot with hands that moved as though she were cradling something precious. When she stood, her voice was soft, but carried a resonance that seemed to echo from the river itself. "You cannot break what the river has blessed," she said, her green eyes glinting like sunlight on water. As if in response to her words, the river stirred. The crowd turned toward the water, where gentle ripples began to swell into waves. The sound of the river deepened, a low rumble that resonated through the ground. Okeke rose from his seat, his face grave. "The river speaks," he murmured, gripping his staff tightly. Chidi, now visibly shaken, tried to laugh it off. "It's just the wind," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, their excitement replaced by a growing fear. Even those who had doubted Amara's unusual presence now felt the weight of something greater at play. The festival resumed, but the mood had shifted. The laughter was more subdued, the dances less exuberant. And as the sun set, casting long shadows over the village, Many couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed an unseen line. In the days to come, the villagers would learn just how deep the river's wrath could run, and just how much they had underestimated the quiet widow with the luminous eyes. The rumble from the river grew louder, unsettling the gathered crowd. The air felt heavy, as though the spirits themselves were watching. The once festive square was now filled with tension, a silent fear creeping over the villagers. Okeke, the wise elder, stepped forward with his staff, leaning on it for support as his keen eyes scanned the water's restless surface. "Njoku River stirs," he said solemnly. His voice carried over the murmurs. "This is no ordinary occurrence. The river speaks when it is displeased." Chidi, still emboldened by pride, scoffed. "It's just water. Are we now frightened of ripples and waves? Let it be still, and let us return to the festivities." The elder turned his sharp gaze on Chidi, his tone carrying an uncharacteristic edge. "Beware your arrogance, young one. It is not just water you mock, but the essence of our survival, the lifeblood of this village, and the abode of the spirits." At that moment, a sudden gust of wind swept through the square, extinguishing the torches and sending palm decorations fluttering into the air. A collective gasp rippled through the villagers as they clung to one another, their eyes wide with fear. Amara stood at the edge of the square, her green eyes reflecting the storm brewing within the river. Though outwardly calm, she knew this was only the beginning. The Njoku River was issuing a warning, but its patience was not infinite. The villagers, shaken by the ominous signs, quickly turned to Okeke for answers. The elder called for calm and ordered the drummers to play softly to appease the spirits. He then declared that a divination must be performed to understand the river's unrest. That evening, the oracle, a mysterious figure cloaked in white, their face obscured by intricate tribal marks, was summoned to the sacred grove. The entire village gathered under the canopy of ancient trees, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation. The oracle knelt before the sacred shrine, their hands moving deftly over cowrie shells and kola nuts spread on a woven mat. They chanted in a melodic, otherworldly tone, calling upon the spirits of the ancestors and the Njoku River. After what felt like an eternity, the oracle raised their head, their voice trembling with both fear and reverence. "The river is displeased. It has been dishonored by our actions. Someone among us has mocked its essence and its spirit. The goddess who dwells within its waters demands justice." A hushed panic spread through the crowd. The villagers exchanged worried glances, each silently questioning their own actions and those of their neighbors. "Who has wronged the river?" Okeke asked, his voice commanding. The oracle's gaze swept over the crowd before resting on Amara. Their voice, steady but weighted with significance, declared, "She knows the truth. She carries the burden of the river's judgment." The villagers turned toward Amara, confusion and suspicion mingling in their expressions. Chidi stepped forward, pointing an accusatory finger at her. "Of course it's her. She's the outsider, the one with strange eyes and unnatural ways. She brought this upon us." Amara remained calm, her expression unreadable, but inside, she felt the sting of their words. She had given them her labor, her skill, and her grace, yet they were quick to blame her without understanding. The tension in the grove was palpable. The villagers demanded answers, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear and accusation. "Silence!" Okeke's voice thundered, silencing the crowd. "Let her speak." Amara stepped forward, her green eyes luminous in the dim light of the grove. She looked at the villagers, men, women, children, each of them holding their breath, waiting for her to explain. "You see only what is in front of you," she began, her voice calm but firm. "You fear what you do not understand, but the river knows the truth. It knows who respects it and who does not." Her words, though measured, sent a chill through the crowd. The villagers felt as though the river goddess herself was speaking through her. "Who are you to speak for the river?" Chidi spat, his bravado faltering under her steady gaze. Amara turned to him, her expression softening not in weakness, but in pity. "I speak because I know the river as you never will, but you will learn soon enough." With that, she turned and walked toward the riverbank, the crowd parting silently to let her pass. The villagers watched her retreating figure, the air around her seeming to shimmer like heat waves over water. That night, the river swelled again, its waters lapping dangerously close to the edges of the village. The sound of rushing water echoed through the huts, keeping the villagers awake. The children clung to their mothers, and even the bravest men avoided venturing too close to the river. In the darkness, Amara stood by the riverbank, her feet submerged in the cool, restless waters. She gazed out at the moonlit surface, her heart heavy with the burden of her decision. The river goddess had been patient, but patience had its limits. The time was nearing when the truth would no longer be concealed, and the mortals would face the consequences of their actions. As the river whispered its ancient songs to her, Amara closed her eyes, preparing herself for the storm that was to come. Morning came, but the usual hum of village life was absent. The villagers woke to an eerie silence, broken only by the persistent roar of the Njoku River. Its waters had risen higher overnight, creeping toward the market square. Fish carcasses lined the banks, a sight that sent shivers down the spines of all who saw them. The elders convened near the shrine, their faces etched with worry. Even Okeke, usually composed, seemed troubled. "The river's fury will not subside until the truth is revealed," he announced solemnly. As the villagers gathered, Amara appeared once again, walking toward the crowd with a calm that seemed misplaced amidst the chaos. Her wrapper clung to her slender frame, dampened by the mist rising from the river. Before she could speak, Chidi, driven by fear and desperation, pointed at her once more. "This is her doing. Ever since she came, nothing has been the same. She brought this upon us." Others murmured in agreement, their fear outweighing their reason. Amara stood silently for a moment, her luminous green eyes scanning the crowd. Her gaze landed on Chidi, who faltered under its intensity. "You seek to place blame on me because it is easier than facing your own misdeeds," she said, her voice steady but firm. "But the river sees all, and it will not be silenced." Suddenly, a great wave rose from the river, crashing against the banks with a force that shook the ground. The villagers screamed, clutching one another as water surged toward the square. But just as quickly as it came, the water stopped, retreating as though held back by an unseen force. The crowd turned to Amara, their fear now mixed with awe. "Who are you?" Okeke asked, his voice trembling. Amara took a deep breath and stepped forward, her feet sinking slightly into the damp earth. "I am not who you think I am," she began. "I came to your village to walk among you, to learn of your hearts and your ways. But what I have found has disappointed me." Her voice grew louder, carrying over the crowd. "You mock the weak, you envy the successful, and you disrespect the sacred. Even now, you seek to cast blame rather than accept responsibility." As she spoke, the river behind her began to glow, its waters shimmering with an ethereal light. The villagers watched in stunned silence as Amara's simple wrapper transformed into a flowing garment of turquoise and silver, shimmering like the river itself. Her hair, once neatly tied, now cascaded down her back in waves, glinting like sunlight on water. "I am Amara, the goddess of the Njoku River," she declared, her voice echoing like thunder. "I came to live among you, to understand your lives and share in your struggles. But your actions have shown me the depths of your flaws." The villagers fell to their knees, trembling. Some wept openly, while others muttered prayers, begging for forgiveness. Even Chidi, who had been so bold, now cowered, his face pale with fear. Amara raised her hands, and the river surged forward, stopping just short of the crowd. Its glowing waters seemed to pulse with her anger. "You have disrespected the river, the lifeblood of your village," she said. "You have mocked its gifts and taken its blessings for granted. For this, you must face the consequences." With a wave of her hand, the ground shook, and the water surged higher, swallowing the market stalls and flooding the farmlands. Crops were uprooted, and the villagers' cries grew louder. "Please, great goddess, have mercy!" Neka cried, bowing until her forehead touched the ground. Amara's gaze softened slightly as she looked at the trembling villagers. "Mercy is not given, it is earned," she said. "You will endure a season of hardship so that you may learn the value of kindness, humility, and respect for the sacred." She raised her hand again, and the water began to recede, leaving behind fertile silt to replace the ruined crops. At the center of the village square, a spring of crystal-clear water burst forth, its flow steady and unending. "This spring is my gift to you," Amara said. "It will sustain you through the coming season. But remember this, If you dishonor the river again, my wrath will not be so easily contained." In the days that followed, the villagers worked tirelessly to repair the damage. The once prideful Chidi became humble, often seen drawing water from the spring and distributing it to the elderly and infirm. Neka, who had been envious and cunning, began sharing her goods with those in need, her sharp tongue softened by gratitude. Okike took it upon himself to teach the younger generation about the importance of respect for the river, for the spirits, and for one another. The story of Amara's time among them became a cherished tale, passed down through generations as a reminder of the goddess's wisdom and mercy. Though Amara had returned to the river, her presence was felt in every ripple, every fish that leaped from the water, and every drop that nourished the land. The villagers honored her through rituals and dances, ensuring that her lessons would never be forgotten. And so, the village by the sacred Njoku River thrived, its people transformed by the teachings of the river goddess who had once walked among them. As the villagers rebuilt their lives, the story of Amara, the river goddess, became a cherished tale, passed down through generations. Her message of kindness and humility echoed through time, reminding all who heard it of the divine connection between humanity and the sacred. And so, by the banks of the Njoku River, the spirit of Amara flowed eternal, guiding the villagers toward a life of compassion and reverence. Now, it's your turn to reflect on this powerful tale. What lessons resonate with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know your favorite part of this story. If you love hearing African folk tales rich in culture and meaning, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to African Tales by Kwaku and Akua, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Let's keep these stories alive together.